To most people, World War II was a war over land and resources, fueled by greed and nationalism. However, it was no ordinary war. It was also a war fought between ideologies. Leaders had separate political beliefs they wanted to enforce, and citizens responded, hoping their quiet voices would be heard from afar. Unfortunately, most citizens were neglected while others were punished for expressing their opinions. A great example would be Hitler's dictatorship in Nazi Germany. Most Germans eventually accepted Nazi tyranny as a part of life, but others still fought for freedom. There were opposition groups in Germany formed by individuals who were willing to sacrifice their lives for what they thought would be a better and Nazi-free Germany. Although there were numerous organizations and individuals that opposed the regime, the ones that'll be mentioned are by far the most significant. However, given the consequences, how successful were these opposition groups in overthrowing the Nazi regime during World War II? According to Frank McDonough's Opposition and Resistance in Nazi Germany, activists in the Communist Party of Germany, or the KPD, and the Red Orchestra were angered by Hitler's tyrannical policies and their lack of political freedom. Communists had been persecuted and sent to concentration camps after numerous protests before the war. The motivation of surviving communists only revived during Hitler's invasion of the Soviet Union. They issued anti-Nazi leaflets and advocated for their political freedom. But in October 1941, their efforts were deemed insignificant. The Gestapo collected a total of 10,277 leaflets and executed countless communists. Their efforts didn't help overthrow the regime in any way. After all, they only advocated for communism, and the Nazis never grew to support or adopt it, and neither did post-Nazi Germany. Another great example of opposition is the White Rose, a small group of students and teachers at Munich University. According to Toby Axelrod's Hans and Sophie Scholl, it was founded by Hans Scholl, a student that served as an army medic and witnessed the mistreatment of Jews, and his sister Sophie Scholl. As former members of Nazi youth groups, they were disgusted by Nazi genocide and anti-Semitism. Rather than violent protests, they wanted to achieve a renewal from within of the severely wounded German spirit. Thus, they wrote 6 anti-Nazi leaflets to distribute around Germany between 1942 and 43, which emphasized Nazi cruelty by informing the public about Nazi oppression and genocide. In their final leaflet, they addressed the fallen men of Stalingrad and wrote, "In the name of the entire German people, we demand of Adolf Hitler's state the return of personal freedom, the most precious treasure of the Germans, which he cunningly has cheated us out of." Unfortunately, as soon as they gained more support from the community, Jakob Schmidt, the university custodian, reported them and got them executed. Despite their fate, it's important to note that they had no political agenda. Their youthful desire for freedom of speech and justice sets them apart from other groups. They succeeded in their goal of raising awareness, but never came close to endangering the Nazis. Finally, another opposition group that was very close to being successful, the Beck-Goerdeler group, was a large military and conservative resistance that tried to take the Führer's life multiple times. Led by Generals Ludwig Beck and Karl Goerdeler, 2 men who resigned from highly respected jobs because they were against Hitler's expansionist policies, this group wanted to kill the Führer in order to establish a coup d'etat that could birth a post-Nazi government based on law, free speech, and social justice. Karl Goerdeler would have been chancellor if their coup had succeeded. They created multiple detailed plans to assassinate Hitler, including the infamous Operation Valkyrie, an assassination attempt they helped put together on the 20th of July 1944, carried out by Klaus von Stauffenberg. He carried a bomb in his briefcase to Hitler's military conference held in his underground Führerbunker in East Prussia. The bomb exploded and killed 4 people, but Hitler survived with minor injuries. Right before they launched their coup, they received news of his survival. Most were sentenced to death, while others committed suicide. There were other attempts that almost succeeded, including a bomb that Officer Henning von Treschow planted on Hitler's plane, and Officer Rudolf Gersdorff's suicide bombs that were supposed to explode during Hitler's visit at the Zeughaus Museum. But Operation Valkyrie was their final attempt. They also contacted the Allies, hoping for a peace negotiation. They tried holding private meetings with officials in Switzerland, contacting President Roosevelt, and warning the Dutch about invasions. But all requests were declined because the Allies thought of them as militaristic traitors. For instance, author Peter Hoffman recalls that former Foreign Secretary of Britain, Anthony Eden, responded to the conspirators with a blunt declination statement. Peace eventually became impossible. They didn't want the loss they were anticipating to be more humiliating. Thus, they refused to return all territorial gains to the Allies and failed to turn in further proof of their resistance for a peace negotiation. Despite their perseverance, most members died without much recognition. Their intentions were initially moral, but their political agenda fueled them. They were almost successful in overthrowing the regime after recruiting officers to join their conspiracy and planting bombs in Hitler's presence, but the Führer survived regardless. Overall, although these acts of bravery raised awareness of Nazi tyranny, they were entirely unsuccessful in actually overthrowing the Nazis. With completely different incentives, the only thing they had in common was the desire for justice one way or another. These stories demonstrate the hardship of zero free speech, the consequences of courage, and the chaos people experience during change. Some commanded, many fought, others mourned, countless died, and now we know some people were risking their lives to overthrow a tyrant. Especially for our species, history repeats itself. If these stories aren't significant enough today, they will be before you know it.